Today is the last day of the three-day military exercises dubbed as Joint Sword, launched by China around the Taiwan Strait. The drills, which Beijing has called a stern warning to the self-governing island, are a response to Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-Wen meeting with the U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy last week in California. According to Taiwan's Defense Ministry, a total of 70 Chinese aircraft flew around the island on Sunday, while 45 warplanes crossed the Taiwan Strait median line. For more on this, we are now being joined by Professor James D.J. Brown, an international affairs expert from Tokyo. Thank you so much for joining us on WION, Professor.
My pleasure.
Now, the waters and airspace around Taiwan have once again become a muscle for military flexing. Now, this is not the first time that China has launched these military drills around Taiwan. In your viewpoint, how do you assess Taiwan's future in the tug of war between the U.S. and China?
Well, actually, on the basis of these recent drills, it looks a very precarious situation. I think many analysts have been somewhat surprised by the vehemence of China's response this time. When the previous Speaker of the US House, Nancy Pelosi, visited in August, China responded in a very fervent manner. But this time, given that the meetings were in the United States, that the US and Taiwan had sought to play down the significance of it, the expectation was that China wouldn't respond quite so forcefully. So the fact that the Beijing has done so really indicates that they're developing very much a zero tolerance approach towards Taiwan, which doesn't bode very well for the security of Taiwan in the future.
Right, Professor, like you mentioned that China had clearly warned that if Tsai Ing-Wen meets McCarthy, it would consider that as a provocation. But help us understand that if Taiwan continues to forge its diplomatic relations with US, these drills will continue in the future as well?
Well, absolutely. It's a very clear message from Beijing that it does not recognize the authorities of Taiwan's right to even hold meetings with foreign powers, to conduct any form of autonomous activity. And what's significant about the drills is that they're not only symbolic. Yes, the goal is to send a message, a clear threat to Taiwan to back off from any autonomous actions, but it's also practicing. It's the Chinese military practicing in case they actually use military force against Taiwan.
Absolutely. We saw on day 2 of these drills how the Chinese aircrafts and warships were encircling Taiwan. China is also planning to conduct live fire drills today, which is the last day of the Joint Sword operation. How do you gauge the situation going forward?
Well, it's truly very shocking when you see the details of the drills that are being conducted, the extent of the military forces being deployed, practicing precision strikes, including on the capital, Taipei. It really just shows how aggressive China's actions have become. And let's not imagine here that there's some equivalence between the Chinese and the US side. On the US side, we have meetings taking place, talks about cooperation. On the Chinese side, however, we see this is clear, threatening, aggressive behavior.
Right. China has also been simulating striking key precision targets on Taiwan, like you mentioned. But it seems like Taiwan's president remains unfazed with the latest maneuvers. Why is that?
Well, I think there'll be a judgment that this tactic from China is not going to succeed, that they hope that by threatening Taiwan, they can encourage the Taiwanese to give ground, to bend the knee to Beijing. But I think the Taiwanese president will calculate that many people in Taiwan will be horrified by this behavior and will have increased determination that they're not going to be forced into a submissive position and to be ultimately taken over by Beijing.
And how are the people of Taiwan reacting to these drills? Are they too used to?
Yes, it's an interesting point. You would imagine that there would be fear, there would be people planning to, leave Taiwan. That's not been the case at all. Instead, it does seem to be that similarly in the case of South Korea, where they're used to being threatened by the North, with Taiwan also, since there have been so many of these threats, so many military drills from China, there does seem to be just an acceptance of this as the new normal.
And what is the difference between the drills that are taking place currently against those that took place during Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan? What are the new additions in Beijing's arsenal?
Well, actually, the most threatening were the ones last year in August, with the main difference being that that included a large number of missile launches, including several that landed in the exclusive economic zone of Japan. So that remains the high water mark. Those were the most aggressive, including practicing a blockade of Taiwan. So these drills are not quite as extensive as that, but still it does show that even for such a minor thing as a meeting within the United States, China is going to flex its military muscles.
Right. Also, with Taiwan presidential elections taking place next year, what impact will China's assertiveness have on the upcoming polls?
Well, that's the big question. So Beijing hopes that it will mean that people will be frightened into supporting the Kuomintang, the party that supports closer relations with the mainland. But I think many analysts might think that the opposite might occur. And in fact, many Taiwanese would instead be pushed further towards their determination to remain separate from Beijing. What exactly will occur, we'll have to wait and see what happens as the campaigns develop.
Right. Also, just today, French President Emmanuel Macron said that Europe should have a very different view on Taiwan, which is not same as US and China. What is your take on that?
Yeah, I think the President Macron's visit has been controversial, that he's taken this stance of seeking to distance France from the United States. He's also emphasized sort of glad handing with the Chinese leadership at a time when Beijing is acting in such an aggressive manner. And so I think that there's been quite a lot of criticism within Europe with this being poorly judged by the French president, right, and actually presenting an image of a divided West when what is needed is unity.
Right. Just to add to that, like Republican Marco Rubio clearly said that Macron's viewpoints may not be that of Europe. But I also want to seek your perspective on Taiwan's position in the global world order. Why is Taiwan important economically, and what is its strategic importance in the current global world order?
Well, on the economic side of things, it's to do with supply chains, and in particular, the extraordinary position of power and influence that Taiwan has developed in the area of semiconductors, with the world's leading producer of those vital chips being a Taiwanese firm. So in that regard, it's strategically very important. But there's the matter of principle as well. If authoritarian China can force Taiwan under its control, can end the autonomy and democracy of the Taiwanese system, then that's a very bad message internationally and would suggest that democracies internationally are seriously under threat from authoritarian powers. So I think there's both that economic angle and also the one of political principle.
All right, one last question to you, Professor, before I let you go. How do you assess Taiwan's future with this war drills taking place and this Cold War between US and China?
So it very much depends on the actions of both Beijing and also the United States. Taiwan clearly cannot protect itself on its own. It requires the support of partners, principally the United States, but others as well, including Japan. And so much will depend on whether supporters in the United States and elsewhere are willing to lend their support and to commit to ensuring that the people of Taiwan can determine their own future. And at the moment, it looks fairly positive in that regard, in the sense that there's bipartisan consensus in the United States in taking quite a strong line against communist China. The other point being Beijing's intentions, and this comes down to the thinking of one man. President Xi Jinping has become more and more powerful, and we've seen in the case of Russia and President Putin that when you have systems that depend on the will of one man, they can make enormous strategic mistakes. And so our hope must be that Xi doesn't repeat the mistakes that Putin made with regard to Ukraine.
Right, absolutely. Thank you so much, Professor, for joining us on WION and sharing your insights with us. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.